Hello and welcome to the Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity in General Practice event. I'm Dr. Shella Imtiaz Omar. I'm the GPTF Fellow for EDI for Derbyshire, and this event has been kindly co-chaired by Sonali Kinra, who's the Clinical Associate for Primary Care at NHS England and Improvement. So just a bit of housekeeping for this event. Please mute yourself unless you're talking and introduce yourself when you do start speaking, just so we know what your background is and know what your remit within EDI is. There is a chat function to participate. Raise your hand and also please unmute yourself when you do come to participating in the discussions. There will be a Q&A panel at the end, and this really will have lots of discussion regarding the points that are raised in today's afternoon event. I'm going to try and make sure that we stick to timing so that everybody can leave at the scheduled time, and the event is being recorded. So in terms of EDI, where are we and where is it that we want to be? So this event really is going to be looking at three main parts: where we are, what we're trying to do, and where we want to be next. And the speakers in the agenda, I'll be starting about the event talking about how do we change the status quo. We then move on to Dr. Zoe Norris, who will be discussing the racism survey that was undertaken by Humberside LMC. Dr. Mo Sattar will be talking about the role of networks in trying to support the EDI agenda within primary care. And then we're joined by Dr. Rupesh Jha and Saika Parveen from the Birmingham Solihull group, looking at the power of networks. There'll be a discussion between Professor Anton Emmanuel and Dr. Sonali Kinra, looking particularly at the importance of data, and then we'll finish off the event with a panel Q&A. So EDI in general practice, how do we challenge the status quo? So a bit of background about my role. I'm a fellow for GPTF. It's a one-year fellowship at 2 sessions a week, and I'm the project lead for equality, diversity and inclusivity for general practice in the county. And this fellowship really has been an opportunity for me to develop leadership and management skills, but particularly in regards to the EDI work, it's to develop a strategy and evolve the offer that we have for our employees within the county. And it's really important as part of this work that we share learning and develop networks. So where are we now? The Workforce Race Equality Standard has been ongoing for the last several years. It's been primarily based in secondary care, so the data is much more secondary care focused, but the findings there can certainly be extrapolated and put into the primary care arena. So we know across the NHS there's 21% of staff that are from a Black, Asian and ethnic minority group. In terms of applications, we know that white applicants are 1.61 times more likely to be appointed to a position after they've applied. And the relatively likelihood of disciplinary action for Black, Asian and ethnic minority staff is 1.16 times more likely to happen compared to a white counterpart. Black, Asian, ethnic minority staff experience harassment and bullying, and unfortunately this trend is showing that there's been a worsening in this particular marker and standard of the Workforce Race Equality Standards that look at this information. Another aspect that's been looked at is whether they feel their trust provides equal opportunities. So this is looking at opportunities to develop personally and professionally, and 71% of Black, Asian, ethnic minority staff do believe that their trust provides equal opportunities for their staff members. And for those people who are new to equality, diversity and inclusivity, I would really recommend reading about the Workforce Race Equality Standards, because it does give you a lot of background as to what's been done in secondary care, and it allows you to think and reflect on what can be done and translated into the primary care arena, simply because it allows benchmarking and a standard to be set so that you can have comparison year-on-year basis, but also between various localities. And some areas are obviously working at a different pace compared to another area, and it may be an opportunity to share good practice about what's worked in terms of the standards that may have shown improvement, and what isn't working and why things haven't improved the way that you would expect with an intervention that may have been put in place. So as part of this work, what I've been looking at is how do we promote EDI within general practice, and there's a number of different ways that we can do this, and this involves engaging, educating, embedding, empowering and inspiring. So I'm just going to go through some of these themes now. So in order to engage, we in primary care and certainly in general practice need data collation, and also look at how we can apply the RES standards into the primary care arena. We know that with stakeholder input that's really GP specific and workforce centric, that we can engage our workforce in order to get that information and therefore recognise where the problems are, if there are problems areas, but also understand what the workforce is saying in terms of their experiences for EDI within general practice. In order to engage our workforce, it's possible to have focus groups, and through that you can identify the needs of the local workforce and therefore look at ways of implementing additional support and help that might be needed. And it's really important that other organisations are engaged within this process. So it's not looking just at general practice, it's looking at what's happening in secondary care, looking at NHS England, Midlands Leadership Academy, for example, and trying to see where those pockets of good practice are, and also other networks across the region, and if not nationally, to engage with those and see what we can do to implement a better workforce environment for our colleagues. Education has been a key part of many training programs and induction programs whenever you start a new place of work, and diversity training is something that's increasingly being incorporated as part of that. And part of that diversity training often takes the form of unconscious bias. More recently, unconscious bias is falling out of favour simply because there's not much data to show that it actually is an effective way of educating our workforce regarding equality, diversity and inclusivity. There is an option of having perspective taking, and this is essentially where a person shares their experience of having been in a situation where they do feel that they've been discriminated on against on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity and so on. But in order to educate our workforce, we also need to have some buy-in, and that buy-in has to take the form of advocacy, and that really has to come from advocacy at senior levels of organisations to generate that buy-in throughout the various levels of hierarchy within an organisation. There needs to be buy-in for resources as well. Often the EDI work has been undertaken by those people who are affected by that discrimination, and that often leads to lack of resources being put in, because often it's volunteered time and effort being put into these networks, which by their very nature becomes very difficult to sustain and maintain. In order to help with the education part, you also need to have a level of accountability, and that comes back to having senior leadership and management involved in this work so that they're aware of what's happening and what the work that's being done is hoping to achieve. And it's really important that accountability is there so that that can be fed through the various chains to ensure that actual change is being made. Embed. We need to embed positive action within our workforce. And how do we do that? We need to embed a framework of data collection. That needs to be something that's routinely done. We need to be able to recognise where the problems are and what the reason for those problems is. And moving on from that, we need to be having leadership opportunities that are made available for all general practice staff, whether that's clinical or non-clinical. They need to be made available readily for all people at all stages, so that there is some promotion of professional and personal well-being for those people who want to take those opportunities up. Mentoring on courses need to be need to be more readily available. So part of the RES standards is looking at the opportunity to do non-mandatory continual professional development as a marker of well-being within a workplace, and also whether there's any areas of discrimination based on ethnicity in that regard. So by embedding regular mentoring courses, mentoring and courses within the workforce, that would allow good practice to be maintained, because those opportunities are going to be made so available to the workforce who want to take those opportunities up without fear of, you know, their other job or their other roles being affected detrimentally. Empower. So part of this afternoon session is going to be looking at networks, and increasingly there's an increased focus on support networks. So this can be support networks for Black, Asian, ethnic minority colleagues, for long-term conditions, for disabled colleagues, LGBTQI plus. So all of those networks are increasingly being utilised in secondary care, and it's about trying to empower workforce to be part of those support networks within the primary care area as well. And empowering can also be in the form of coaching and mentoring, and whether these are formal or informal relationships, we know that having that support there is invaluable for those people to feel empowered, that they can make a positive change in their workforce. And it doesn't have to be anything drastic, it doesn't have to be a major change, but you know, part of the NHS People Plan is really looking at a cultural change, and those have to be, you know, small steps to get a bigger cultural change across the NHS. Other ways of empowering include reverse mentoring and sponsorship, which has increasing data behind their effectiveness in terms of trying to empower our colleagues. Finally, inspire. So as we move forward through looking at equality, diversity, inclusivity, we need to look at how we're inspiring our colleagues, whether that's in our practice where we're working or within our PCN. And looking externally, we also need to look to see where is it that we can have influence and inspire other people. And that can be outside of our organisations, and looking at what we can do within the general practice area or primary care, and what can be inspiring for external organisations such as our secondary care colleagues. We also need to look at how we can inspire our medical and allied health care professional students. We need to be showing that we're a representative of their backgrounds, whether that's on race, religion, ethnicity and backgrounds. And by showing that primary care and general practice specifically is inclusive, that will hopefully promote increased opportunities for medical and AHP students as well. As people who work in general practice, we are within our communities, we're embedded within those areas, and we serve and live and work within those communities. And by having equality, diversity and inclusivity within our organisations, that we can help inspire our own community to take those points forward and have those actionable within their own communities, because we're part of those communities that we work and live in. So in summary, what we want to do is engage, educate, embed, empower and inspire. Thank you so much. My contact details are at the bottom of this slide. I'm more than happy to receive emails or tweets in regards to the work that I've been undertaking, and certainly the contacts and the other opportunities that are available for developing equality, diversity, inclusivity in general practice. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Zoe Norris. As you may notice, there was a technical problem on the day, so there is a few minutes of Dr. Norris's talk that is missing, for which I apologise, but the vast majority of our content is there, and I hope that the rest of this event is useful for you, for those who are watching this recording. Thank you.
To start to challenge people and to be saying, you know, okay, well, you're talking about forming new representative structures, a different way of engaging with primary care. So how are you going to always ensure that you know that you've got equality, diversity and inclusion embedded within that? How are you going to make sure this isn't just the same people who've always done it? How can we positively promote this to colleagues from different backgrounds and get their experience and build that in as a positive rather than it being seen as a negative? So at the moment, we've got lots of stuff going on as an LMC. We've also got funding for 3 years of leadership training for colleagues from BME backgrounds, and we selected a provider for that called the Hobbs Consultancy, based on input from our anti-racism task and finish group, with the idea being that we don't have many higher profile leaders within our local system from a diverse range of backgrounds. And the feedback we had was, this needs to be about colleagues feeling comfortable to bring their experience, to bring their background, their religion, in an authentic way, rather than feeling they have to conform to what the system expects of them. So we're starting off offering that initially to a group of 12, which is separated into male and female. And then we're going to follow that up with broadening it out so that we can make sure there are then opportunities for those colleagues. Again, it's no point doing part of the job of empowering them to take on leadership roles and then not having any leadership roles available. So in summary, I think it's a learning curve. I think it's opened my eyes, certainly, and I think we just need to be prepared to say, look, we might get this wrong, but it's not enough to stand by. It's not enough to say, oh dear, isn't that dreadful? We need to be really challenging ourselves. And the reception so far has been 90% positive. lots of other LMCs getting in touch, lots of local stakeholders getting in touch, good discussions with CCGs and ICS. So an open offer if anybody wants to contact me about replicating the work or just finding out a bit more detail about what we're doing. I'm really happy to send that through.
Thank you so much, Zoe. That was amazing, and I think your data has been really insightful, and it really has spoken volumes for those people who have experienced discrimination. And the fact that you're working on an action plan to really get things changed is inspirational, and hopefully will bear lots of fruit. I'll hand over Sonali, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you, Zoe, and thanks for that, Sheila. So I'm delighted to invite Dr. Mo Sattar. Mo is, I would say, a friend. So he's a GP partner and a trainer in Leeds, and he is certainly a man with many hats on. He is on board of trustee for 2 local health-related charities, Feel Good Factor and St. Gemma's Hospice. Man with many interests. So you will see him do a weekly community radio host and broadcaster at Fever FM. I've had the opportunity to join one of them as well. And I think what's really interesting is how he raises, issues and challenges around health, social and educational matters. Also has a keen interest and in Pakistani heritage musical talent, devotional ghazals, qawwalis. He has also been the founder and currently chairing the Black Asian Ethnic Minority Primary Care Leeds Network, and we're going to hopefully hear more about that and the power of networks. It has also featured in the BMJ. He has also been a very keen supporter, as well as being a good voice at the Royal College of GPs Black Asian Ethnic Minority Awareness Task Group. And finally, he also regularly contributes to the thriving West Yorkshire and Harrogate Integrated Care System BAME network, inspired to lead with action instead of just words. And I hope that he's going to speak a little bit more about it. And we will certainly add the link to the new campaign. I think it's going to be final release on the 23rd of August on the Say No to Abuse and Anti-Racism campaign. So delighted to welcome and invite Mo to share more about the work that he's doing in Leeds.
Wow. I think that's a generous introduction, and yeah, I'm really delighted to be here actually. And over the next sort of 15-20 minutes, I hope that I'll be able to share really the role and the purpose of networks. And then I think I'm going to be followed by the power of networks, a couple of colleagues coming after me, and I hope that you will find the next few minutes really thought-provoking, and really it's a sort of a mishmash of sort of thoughts, experiences, and sort of information really for you to sort of think about. So I'm gonna share my screen. I also should commend Zoe for the work that they have been doing, also really fantastic. And actually in Leeds, on the back of their survey, Lewisham survey, Doncaster survey, that I'm aware of, we're currently undertaking the primary care survey in Leeds. So watch this space. We've currently got about 360 respondents, and we think there's about 2,000 people working in primary care in Leeds. So let's see what the themes are from that. So as I said, I'm going to talk about the role and the purpose of networks. Just going to double check that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, great. And I think it's important. I'm a real Twitter addict. I'm sure lots of you are. The power of Twitter. If you want to tweet what we're doing today, then do tag me as well at Being Mo. So, last night was incredible, wasn't it? And even if you are not a football fan, I'm sure that you have been sucked in and are on the great bandwagon, which is the Euro 2020. And I couldn't do this talk without mentioning the football and taking the knee. because you will have seen many teams, but the England team certainly has been taking the knee at every match. And I just wanted us to reflect on that. There's a Sterling, I think, on his knee, and behind him, a player at Leeds United, I think he is. Really, this was born out of an American footballer, Colin, who took the knee during the national anthem before a match in the 2016. And he said that he could not stand to show pride in the flag of a country that oppressed Black people. And then taking the knee was born. And when we look back in history, then we will see people from certainly the Black community doing similar things many years ago. And, you know, networks are springing up everywhere, and networks are not new. And I wanted to stay with the theme of football and just look at what network do they have in trying to address this agenda, because actually we all share very similar challenges. And the network that exists, I'm sure it's not the only one, but one of the more recognized ones is the FAIR Network, which is an umbrella organization that brings together individuals, informal groups, and organizations driven to combat inequality in football and use the sport as a means for social change. And if we look at the title that I've been given, which is the role and the purpose of networks, then I could stop right here, because really the purpose of a network is to create a social movement which brings about change. And, you know, kudos to the players, to England and Fair Network for taking the knee. And it has to start at the top. And the England manager, Gareth Southgate, and if you want to look at any leadership, look at his, said his players decided to continue during Euro 2020, and he said that we feel more determined than ever. Let's look at the history in defining networks. So they emerged in 1970s in the US, and they migrated to the UK a decade later. And the current prevalence of networks is difficult to ascertain, but I would say that they're certainly growing, and we saw a resurgence and a real awakening of networks, specifically BAME networks. And for the purposes of this talk, I will use the term BAME, BAME, and that's a story or a debate for another time. And I'm aware that that perhaps is not something that people are most comfortable with, but because people understand what it means, I'll continue to use that if that's acceptable to people. And they are commonly set up for those people with protected characteristics. So we're looking at age and disability, race and religion, but also can be set up for those people with non-protected characteristics like new parents. And my registrar sitting behind me, disability activist Hannah Barron Brown, said, "Mo, I hope someone's going to talk about disability." And I said, "I will." So there we are. I've plugged disability as well as a protected characteristic, a real activist in disability rights. And the role is to focus on the concerns or the needs of employees based on social identity, gender, ethnicity, and they're identifiable as an organization which distinguishes them from informal social networks that always exist in organizations. And that that definition, and we'll look at a couple more definitions interspersed within my slides, was from Friedman, Kane and Cornville in 1998. On the right, my right, you will see the vast variety of networks that exist in the organization Transport for London. And you will see that they have a BAME network, a carers network, a disability network, a faith and wellbeing network, an LGBT plus network, and also a women's network. You might be sitting there and think, well, what's the point? You know, well, let's just look at the compelling case. And, you know, I use this cover time and time again. And, you know, if you haven't read this edition of the BMJ, you really should. And this really, after reading this and going through some of the lived experiences of microaggression or racism within my practice as a GP trainee, as a junior doctor, this just ignited the fire in my belly. I just want to take a moment to think about why equality and diversity matters in our NHS, and also the impact that COVID-19 has had in realizing or shining a spotlight on these matters. And if we just reflect on some of the statistics in the NHS, 1.4 million people work in the NHS, 1 in 5 of a BAME origin, 20% of staff BME, if we look at it as a percentage, 28% of GPs, 50% of London nurses and midwives are BAME. And the research and evidence strongly suggests that BAME staff in the NHS are treated less favorably, have poorer experience and progression opportunities. And this in turn has significant implications for the efficient and effective running of the NHS, including adverse impacts on quality of care received by all patients. So in effect, what I'm saying and what many say, and the evidence and the research says, is if we get this right for staff, then we get this right for patients. And that's why we get out of bed every morning. And if we just reflect on COVID-19, and when I wrote this this slide, I mean, I've redone it recently, but when I did it, it was sort of April time, I think, last year, and there were 119 NHS staff known to have died in the early pandemic, and 64% of those were from an ethnic minority background. And I was left asking the questions, as were many people, that why are ethnic minorities disproportionately affected by COVID-19, and what are we going to do about it? And perhaps networks is one of the things that we might be able to do. And I would say, and if you're going to take anything away from today, it is that each of us can do something, regardless of where we are in the hierarchy and whatever our role is. And having a network provides that platform for you to be able to do that. And what I would say is that if you're not going to do it in a crisis, then when are you going to do it? And if you're not going to do it, then who is going to do it? And really, if we all do it, then this is how the light will really get in. There's report after report now around the workforce race equality standard, and I hope that you'll be able to go away and think about the workforce race equality standard and familiarize yourself, because that really does form some of our evidence base in terms of reaffirming why this is really important agenda. But in 2017, this report, very, very interesting, formulated and written by Coghill, Yvonne Coghill and Roger Klein, who famously wrote The Snowy White Peaks. And they said that engaging with staff in a meaningful and sustained way is important in helping to make continuous improvements on the workforce race equality agenda. And staff networks, also called employee or diversity networks, aim to make a difference. And that is the bottom line. And the most important thing about the NHS is the people. The most important thing about networks is people. And the most important people are people. And that's a Blairism, isn't it? People, people, people. You used to say everything in threes: education, education, education. And our strength of networks is that we use skills and experience, knowledge and influence to lead a social movement of change and innovation. And this quote below is from one of our network members of the Leeds Primary Care BAME network, and she said, I come back to meeting after meeting on an evening once a month because I hear stories that link us, that affirm and inspire, they instill confidence, and they make me realize that we are still brilliant. The picture there you see is a few of our members, fantastic members, and on the left, most left there, you see Rian Last and also Jim Barwick, Chief Executive of the GP Confederation, our sponsors. This is a story so far, and we might think about, well, what is the role and the purpose of networks? Each network is going to have its own purpose and specifics, and I would encourage you to stay local. Localism is the best. And, you know, our aims and objectives have come out of focus groups and talking to our members, and we're a member-led organization. But there are some key themes that you will see, and they are including but not exhaustive, storytelling. You know, there is a time of unburdening for people and our members. People talk about diverse interview panels. They talk about visibility and role models, an embryonic perhaps workforce race equality standard, although I'm moving more towards a charter, united policies and campaigns in terms of when we do come into difficulty, what do we do? Reverse mentorship and coaching, and also spreading the word via blogs, and everyone can write about what they're experiencing and what they're part of. Alia there on the right, tweeting at one of our meetings, and you'll see our guest speaker there, Baroness Saida Wasi, who talked about fire in her belly and not being afraid to break China's status quo, often reinforced by the rules. So now, in terms of sort of help when we are looking at networks and sort of the role of networks, there are stages of maturity in BAME staff networks, and this is just a model, and I just wanted to share this because people might think, well, what can I do and how do we develop our network? Well, this is just a framework, and you might find that really, really helpful, from Helen, Bevan and Naeem Ahmed. And, you know, it looks about connect, share, drive and thrive. And I would say that we have formed and now are storming as a network. And two things from the particular document that I've taken that graphic from really stuck with me, which is that all BAME staff networks will be supported and invested in. Every network will have a board level champion, ideally a non-BAME ally to provide sponsorship. And perhaps Zoe, who was speaking a moment ago, is fulfilling that space in her local area. And the second real thing for me is that I am the founding chair, but my mantra is that we create agents for change that go back into their practices through our networks to say, look, this is our issue. And but it is a badge of honor being able to lead a network and a BAME network. Look, this is really difficult, and each organization has its problems. And I would say that we need to reflect on here, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Some of you might have seen this slide before because I reuse it all the time. One of my favorite quotes, really. And she said that we need to fight for the things that we care about, but do it in a way that really will lead others to join you. And this is emotive and challenging and difficult, but actually we don't want to bang on tables and break down doors. Actually, we want to create such a change and a movement where actually people feel drawn and invested and want to help us. Finally, one of the things that we don't do is celebrate our success. This is Phenomenal Women. It was a photographic exhibition honouring Britain's Black female professors. It featured about 40 professors at the London City Hall last year, 18th of March, and this is what we don't do. So I hope that we'll be able to celebrate our success a little bit more, because there's lots of it. Going to get involved. This is one of the ways. Our next speaker, 27th of July, 1 year anniversary, is Habib Naqvi. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Mo, for the whistle stop tour. I know how hard you've been working over not just the last year, but beyond to really get your network set up. And I think I've had a chance to be able to attend some of those, and I think it's just the diversity that you bring within those network meetings. And it, you know, the meetings I think are set up for about an hour or an hour and a half, and we could easily be going into 2 hours, because it's that fire in the belly that certainly comes across when you attend those meetings. I think, Mo, if you have a link to that, toolkit for the BAME staff network, which I think was released about 14 to 16 months ago, if you have a link, and if you don't mind putting that in the chat box, because I think it was quite useful, certainly for us when we used it in Nottingham, talking about that purpose, your stakeholders, and how you bring people along, extend the table, and break those glass ceilings. I think that would be really helpful. So thanks for that, Mo. And I'm now excited to invite our next speaker, which is Dr. Rupesh Jha, who is a Vice Chairman of the Birmingham Solihull CCG EDI Network and is a full-time GP, being over 13 years trainer, and is a training program director. And special interests include lifestyle medicine along with the quality improvement. And I certainly remember having lots of conversations with Rupesh as the network was getting set up in BSOL, and also when he was going for his own interview. So welcome, Rupesh. And I'm not sure if you're doing this on your own or you've got your colleague as well, who shall be presenting today on Power of Networks, and equally the work that you've been doing with the Health Inequalities team in BSOL.
Thanks, Sonali. It's lovely to see you. And Zoe, I think she's just left, but so Zoe and I go a long way along the VTS in Lincolnshire, and that's how we all started. And I can remember Zoe as a, an outspoken kind of thing. So when she took on this role, I was so excited. So no, thank you. I have with me Saika Perveen, who is our manager who supports our the network, the EDI network, along with another manager. So it's been an interesting journey. And I clearly remember speaking to you for a long time when this was all happening, and I wanted to apply for this position. And I'm not sure, Onye, who's our kind of lead, another powerful and a very kind of passionate, whom probably people would be aware of. She leads this network. So when we were asked to kind of come out and say, spend a few minutes how this all started, I thought it's a good opportunity. Because if we go back 8 months, we didn't exist. There was nothing as such in Birmingham and Solihull. And all these words, active bystander, ally, all these things were pretty new. Nobody knew about it. And we were not using these terms very frequently, res. And now 8-9 months down the line, this is more common term. People understand what it all means about. So to start from somewhere we didn't exist to what we are now. And I think this is a beginning of a long journey, a long kind of things where we all have to, work together. So what I would probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes tell you how it all started, how we have been supported, what we do. And I'll also be kind of supported by Saika, who's our manager, as to how she has liaised with all our PCNs. So we have just got 4 or 5 slides, so we haven't got many slides to go through, but we'll be quite happy to take any questions. So Shala, if you can, do you want to share the slides for me, please, if you're around? Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Shala. Perfect. Okay, good, thank you. The next one, please. Yeah, so as I said, it all started with a kind of requirements, as Mo has very beautifully mentioned, about where you are in your journey, about your establishing a BME network. So there was an advert. They said we needed some clinical leads, we needed some managers, and this network was started. There was kind of recruitment as usual. And we went through a proper interview process, and it was started. Now, it's quite, it's a network with around 300 members as so far, and the number is growing. So we have around 300 members in this EDI network. And we have, the way this has been designed is we have links throughout. So we have senior leaders within the RICS who are supporting it. And then we have links to individual practices. And it's a kind of a chain that's been set up from senior leadership to this BMA network to individual practices. We have support from our comms and engagement team, so that probably helps us to communicate all our meetings and works. We have participation in both local, regional, and national forums. So Our clinical lead, Dr. Konko, she is the BMA co-chair for West Midlands. She also has positions along in the college, the RCGP, and I represent our local LMC, take part in the local regional meetings, and then we have support from our managers. We have support from two of our very senior leaders within the CCG who have been kind of very actively supporting us. And the way we have structured it is we have a monthly meeting for our BMA network. And what we have done is we have obviously like national speakers who come and talk to us. And at this stage, we are raising awareness about what it's all about. And for some of you who have not read the work which Zoe has done, I think it's a very disturbing read, but maybe you could. I would definitely suggest having a look at those reading from the Humberside LMC. And you will see how difficult it has been for our Abin and IMG myself, and how difficult it has been from people while working in the NHS, and people took it as part of being as normal. So I think it's a difficult read, but you will see the problems with this going on. And unless we form networks, unless we do something about it, we are not going to make any changes. So as part of our EDI network meetings, we discussed about the COVID issues and also the low uptake. And we had real big challenges about how we support our practices to increase uptake, especially in these areas where, as you know, Birmingham has quite a diverse group. And so we worked with our COVID vaccination team, the program, to increase uptake, working with practices. What we also did was we had a standardized risk assessment for all staff. So we used the SAD tool, made some changes along it, and then passed on to practices to incorporate it as part of it. And I will pass on to Saika, so just to talk about our inclusion tool and what that data was. It was a data gathering exercise. So I'll let Saika say a few words about the PCN inclusion tool. Saika?
Sure. Thank you, Rupesh. So just to touch on some of the things that Rupesh has been talking about, as a network, we were established in November 20. And since being established, we have been working hard to build links with various partners within the system for a cohesive and collaborative approach, with a view to reporting to the ICS People's Board. And as Rupesh has touched on, we have representation at different levels. So at CCG level, we have, Dr. Aftab Arif, who reports at a national level to People's Board. We have Dr. Rupesh Jha and Dr. Onyo Konko, who are health inequalities leads with Birmingham and Solihull ICS. We have, again, Dr. Aftab Arif and Onyo Konko. They are Birmingham and Solihull system-wide vaccination Birmingham Solihull system-wide vaccination steering group, looking to kind of again increase low uptake for vaccinations within hard to reach communities. We try and have representation at all levels, national, regional and local. In terms of our network, we do have thriving membership. We currently have over 300 members, and membership is actually growing. If we look at our members vary from GPs, pharmacies, social prescribers, managers, admin support, reception staff, cleaners. So we do have a huge variety of members within our network. Again, touching on what Rupesh mentioned about comms and engagement, we do actively try and promote our membership and work, through different avenues to promote and engage. And some of these include things like support from our CCG comms team, again, numerous participation at local and national and regional forums. We are looking to have an online presence. This is in the process of being set up. Another way we engage with our network is we are the first STP that has set up health set up to have health inequalities champions. So across our patch, we have 31 health inequalities champions that span each of the PCNs. So there's one per PCN. And actually, these health inequalities champions aren't necessarily clinical. So it can range again from, you know, our health inequalities champions. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have managers, we have PCN pharmacists, social prescribers. So we do have a range of representation for our health inequalities champions. In terms of the work our health inequalities champions do, they support us in disseminating our agenda and some of the things that we want to see and the change that we want to implement. As a PCN manager, I can say that our health inequalities champion, I work closely with our health inequalities champion to look at, you know, helping support reducing inequalities within the workplace and for our patient population. So some of the things that we've looked at, some of the quick wins that we've looked at is actually making sure our PCN is all registered as safe surgery, looking at whether all our PCN practices are a living wage employer. So these are the type of quick wins that we've tried to implement. And again, these have been driven from what was the BAME staff network and is now Birmingham and Solihull Equality and Diversity Network. So again, just to touch on, you know, the work that we do, our health inequalities champions are really critical for the work that we do. In terms of how we try and do this, I think the key for us is, and I think Rupesh will agree with this, is getting buy-in at all levels. So we do push to have representation at our monthly meetings from the ICS and the CCG at high board level. We do push to kind of like have them there to facilitate those difficult dialogues and difficult conversations. We get them to attend the meeting, and as a regular sitting agenda item, for example, we have you know, a lived experience. So, you know, we actively engage with our network to have a member come and talk about their lived experience and, you know, talk about some of the you know, discriminations that they faced. And, you know, and we always find that people are really happy to share, and they really want to kind of like share this information. And actually you know, that they are difficult conversations, but they are conversations that need to be had and relay to those that have the power to help drive the change. So I think that's the ethos of our network, making sure that the right people are involved at the right levels to kind of drive the change. So it's not just something that we're trying to push down, we try and push up as much as we try and push down.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks, Saika. Can I have the next slide, please? And as I said, we have 31 health inequality champions. So this is a role, as I said, the first STP in the country to establish this role. It's a one session a month for health inequality champions, which they meet one for an hour every month, just to set up how things would work in every PCN. So we have 31 of those across Birmingham and Solihull. And what they have, so initially when we set up the SAD score, the risk assessment score, these health inequality champions went back to practices to see how they had, whether they had managed to complete it, what issues they had. And obviously they liaised with us, our managers, to see if any practices, if they had any issues out of it. As part of the Birmingham and Solihull ICS, the Health Inequalities Project Board, they have allowed us to have a funding of around 2,000 to support any project. So all these 31 PCNs will be starting with a project which they deem necessary for their area. So people are working, as I said, on safe surgeries or anything that would work for the respective PCNs to increase any uptake, work on some pre-diabetes, diabetes, obesity, mental health. So we had a meeting yesterday, and again, this is some of the individual projects which is being funded. Can I take the next slide, please? And this is generally a role outline for the health inequality champions, what exactly they do. So their role is it's quite a diverse kind of mix of people from various backgrounds who probably support in their role as health inequality champions. But overall, as I said, I think we have one more slide giving a number of, this is all the PCNs across the area. And just to conclude that, as I said, this is not possible without the support from all your senior leadership. And we have a board ally, an ally who probably supports us on a regular basis, comes to our meeting. And I think this has been a mutual effort from all of us, trying to see whether we can bring a change. Quite happy to take any questions if you have towards the end. But this is how the journey has started. And as I said, we would say we're in the very early stages. We're just trying to connect at this point of time before we can actually thrive. We would like to thrive, but our journey is just started. And quite happy to kind of share our experience with any network or any practice or any area who would like to, get some more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupesh and Psyche. You've given some really great information. I think one of the conversations that I'd had with Anya and Aftab was certainly around the health inequalities work that your group has been doing, because it's really inspirational. The fact that you've got such a great setup is really a model to be emulated across different regions. So thank you for sharing insights into your journey in getting to where you are now.
Thank you.
So moving to the next part of today's event is really about what's next. And the next part is having a conversation with Professor Anton Emanuel and Sonali Kinra. So for those who don't know, Professor Anton is the head of Workforce Race Equality Standards. He obtained his medical degree from London University. He's a professor of neurogastroenterology at University College London and a consultant gastroenterologist at University College Hospital at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in Queen's Square. He currently supervises 5 postgraduate research fellows. And in terms of today's event, he's actually the head of Workforce Race Equality Standards for NHS England and NHS Improvement. He's currently leading the next phase of the RES, which is cultural transformation, and is working alongside national and regional teams in implementing the RES. He's ambitious in closing the gaps between BME and white staff in terms of recruitment, of promotion, of disciplinary action and race inequalities. And he ultimately wants to improve the experience of staff in the NHS to be equitable, which can then translate to improved patient outcomes. On a personal basis, Prof. Anton is a father of 4, immigrant of African Asian origin, a Londoner, multiple amateur in guitarist, homebrewer and record collector. So thank you, Anton, for coming. Although Sonali gave a brief introduction at the start of the event, I just want to introduce her formally. She's a clinical associate in the primary care team at NHS England and NHS Improvement. She completed her undergraduate training in India and moved to England in 2004, and then began practicing as a GP in 2008 after gaining her MRCP and MRCGP. Since then, she's been a GP partner, a sessional GP, and continues to practice as a portfolio GP in North Central London. Sonali continues her role as GP retention lead in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire integrated care system, and is working with various stakeholders to improve recruitment, retention and wellbeing across traditional and additional roles in general practice and PCNs. In October 2020, she was elected nationally to serve as a member of the RCGP Council for 3 years. And Sonali's worked collaboratively across primary and secondary care to improve the interface and patient outcomes. She's held multiple leadership roles across commissioning and provider organisations while championing the cause of improved equity and engagement across patients and workforce. And for me personally, she's been an absolute massive supporter and mentor in trying to help with the work that I've been trying to do in guiding me on my journey, certainly as becoming a GP and leading on the work in the EDI arena. So thank you, Sonali, and thank you to Prof. Anton for coming as well. And I'll hand over to you both just to have a conversation regarding the RES for secondary care and what the learning has been over the last several years and how we could potentially implement that in primary care.
Thanks, Shella, for that. I can't see Anton on my screen, so hopefully you can see him on your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see him now. Hi, Anton. Thank you for sparing time this afternoon. Anton, what we heard certainly repeatedly is while each area is trying to gather data around workforce race equality within primary care, we know that there is lack of any standardized data within primary care. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. The secondary care workforce race equality standards has now been for about 6 to 7 years. And what would be helpful for us to know as to what has the learning been, having had secondary care res, and how has it brought about any change or improvement as we embark upon this journey in primary care? Probably a bit of a loaded question. So a bit of a look back before we set off doing this in primary care, because I think we all do agree we do need this.
No, thanks, Anali, and thanks for the invitation, Shella, and all the colleagues. And as I've stuck my email in the chat because I really want to be engaged with this, and I'm in the team now for 5 months. And so the question I would say is that I think you're absolutely right, Sonali. It's just set up with good intentions. And as a BME person in the workplace, 6 years ago when the data first came out, I was really excited. I thought, oh, great! It isn't, well, not great, but it isn't just me experiencing this. It's a widespread thing, and people now know it, so they can't claim ignorance. But fundamentally, the problem is that, as I often use analogies, we have just done the same thing again. We've just gone up and down the lawn, mowing the lawn every year, gone back and forth, collecting the data, showing the data. And then latterly, our strategy has been to ally that to some training programs. And fundamentally, that is not going to work. So the learning for me, as we try and develop this, and I should say that I'm working with social care colleagues because I want, when we move to system working, I would like it that when ICS leaders get their risk, hopefully working in primary care is strictly speaking outside the remit of NHS England, stupidly and weirdly as it is, given that almost all the work happens in primary care. But anyway, given all those things, if we can make it look communal, we can then pivot to strategies. So when we know the few things that have done well is where things have been actioned, where to a strategist said the data on, for example, classically disciplinary processes. Why is it that our BME staff colleagues get inappropriately and disproportionately disciplined and get referred more often and then get handled more inequitably? And when actions are taken around that, when it's very structural, focused actions with evidence-based actions around early triage, around formal monitoring, around getting advocacy involved, those evidence-based, when they were done, the one thing that the res can claim success for, hold its hand to its heart, is on that data, where we've seen a steady progressive decline in both the ratio, but also the number of organizations. So if there's a lesson to learn going forward, it's not just to collect the data. That isn't going to get the, as we say in Tamil, get the potatoes cooked. If you're going to get this done, you have to get the data and then ally those things to actions at local accountable level. And that's the big move we're trying to move to now, is to try and move to local accountability. So presenting it to organizations saying, for you, your particular data that's bad is on your female, because this is also gendered, women have a much worse experience than men for the same ethnicity. For example, your female Filipino nurses at band 5 and below are not being promoted. In your organization, it's for your Black psychiatric nurses. In your organization, it's for your Bangladeshi midwives. It's to try and give organizations local accountable data that they have to act on. So that for me is the fundamental thing. Local accountability, use the data in a way to pivot to action, and not just do training, because you can't train people out of bad practice.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anton. I think data is only as good as what it leads to in terms of those tangible actions that you alluded to. And I certainly found Roger Klein had done kind of 10 blogs, I know, in BMJ Leader, which really helped me in trying to set up an action plan, because it was really looking at your outcomes, whether it's a disciplinary action for primary care. People have spoken about what about our CQC ratings of those practices that are probably led by ethnically diverse GP partners, so people who are from Black, Asian, ethnic minority, or our reporting towards the GMC. or have people had an opportunity to be leaders within the clinical commissioning groups or primary care networks and henceforth. But I think, Anton, when you talk that local accountability that you talk about, and I think one of the challenges that we face in primary care is that they're individual businesses. How do we, so if I give you an example of Nottingham, we have an equivalent of 130 practices that are there just within the Nottinghamshire integrated care system. And I would think similar sort of numbers in other areas as well. And these are individual businesses. So when we start talking about outcomes in such cases or bringing about that change, it feels sometimes that people may think we're encroaching upon an employer-employee relationship, which I would guess is similar in secondary care trusts as well. So how do we round that to convince people that this is the right thing to do? Because as you know, we've spoken about networks and others, that this is not just something that we're doing for our staff. It's also about actually improving patient health outcomes. So how have you taken people along in that journey to say this really matters, this is important stuff?
So you've hit upon the critical factor, of course, Sonali, which is that RES or any of these things don't have teeth. There's a Public Sector Equality Act duty that we have, but fundamentally that doesn't allow us to compel anything. So what you exactly said at the end was the spot-on version, which is that we have to bring people's sort of hearts and minds into this. So the vague carrotty, so the stick part of this equation, if we can use that, is that we're trying to work with CQC and so on to show why it is that it matters. So we're generating data in secondary care trusts showing that if you look at your RES metrics in interesting ways, it correlates with things like staff vaccine, with cancer targets, with A&E weights, with trust finances. In other words, this should be a fundamental KPI, it shouldn't be an optional extra. Focusing post-Brexit or post-recovery or whatever else. There's, you can say, like, it isn't something you say, oh, I'll try and do an EDI action in 2 years' time or 5 years' time. It's fundamental to your metrics there. Do that part, do the part around CQC to try and persuade them that it's important, because CQC does have a board which does include, one of the things they assess organizations on is based on their EDI thing, but it isn't a pass-fail type thing. So try to get CQC investigators to join our group to show that to actually show why this matters to staff outcomes and to patient outcomes. So that's the kind of the stick part. The carrot part is to do the thing where we're trying to say, look, let's publish. How about publishing your plan? So we're using the things we can, like the model employer targets, and say, you should have this kind of representation. Don't submit it to us, but publish your ambitions in this area. So currently you have 6% BME staff, but only 2% represented at senior levels. How about an ambition that you'll increase it by 1% per year or something like that? And here's where we can help you with the data to show that your particular bottleneck is here or there or whatever. So trying to encourage people to publish their ambitions, and we'll support you with data, but equally having the evidence-based things. For me, I'm obsessed by that idea that there are, we don't have to reinvent things. We can look at what happens when Ernst & Young did this to get more sales, when we can look at what the Norwegian army did to get more women into their senior positions. We can learn from other parallel countries, parallel sectors, which have undertaken actions to get equity in their workforce, and borrow that not just for promotion, but for retention, for stretch opportunities, for harassment and bullying. So I think doing those things inevitable. So for me, yeah, mixture of things. Trying to ally it to CQC type things, trying to encourage good practice by showing that it actually matters in other dimensions, so that you'll make better care happen, and then trying to encourage people to. But ultimately, it's encouragement rather than until we get given a change of contract, which isn't going to happen. We're not going to be able to have any teeth with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot about approaching to the hearts and minds and taking people along and extending that table. Also, I think, Anton, and I think Zoe spoke about this as well, that we're probably at a pivotal time with the health and care bill and with forming of these new integrated care systems or people going through that journey. How do you see the kind of responsibility and accountability, let's say, of these ICS towards, we speak about one workforce, and yet, I think I think the primary care workforce at times feels left out because we are commissioned to provide services. I don't think we come under the umbrella of the entire workforce. So, but what are the conversations that are happening around, the meetings that you attend, that how will the ICS equally be responsible for the primary care workforce within that system? And how can we actually benefit from some of the benefits that are available to secondary care? We multiple times hear about the lack of occupational health, standardized terms and conditions, lack of agenda for change in primary care. So at times, primary care has felt that it has been left out or left behind because of the independent contractor status. But how do you see that space now evolving with integrated care systems?
So if I'm really honest with you, everyone on the call, I would say that I think the understanding of some colleagues in the national offices is not as deep as it should be. What we do see, therefore, is we have had a desperate conversation not long ago with somebody, a lead for an ICS in Northwest England, shall we say, who said to me, yeah, it's all very well talking about this, Anton, but the problem is that you're introducing a Trojan horse of EDI into my ICS. And I thought to myself, good God, if that's how you see this, if I'm bringing a Trojan horse of secondary care stuff into, then your poor employees. So that's the problem. You don't want me to tell you the problem. What's the opportunity? That's why I can speak to the RES thing. What we're doing is, I would see that what we have to do is provide local system-based data, not national data. So hereafter, going forward, it began this year, but the national report that comes out once a year will just be like to use a vinyl record collecting, as Sheila Bourdieu collect vinyl, and it would be like a best of album, which you should never buy, by the way. What we want to do is go to each system with their detail of their original data at this granular level by gender, by type of ethnicity, by type of the workforce. And so from there, we can then say, right, actually, you know what we're seeing is that your data shows that you have a particular problem with this aspect of things. So the learning and the implementation there that we're going to do in your specialist cancer center in your system would actually work well shared across there. It's a two-edged sword, of course, as you can see, because sometimes people will bury their data saying, oh, well, we've got this fantastic organization over here doing great work, so our bad data looks diluted out. But obviously, we're going to present it by system, but also by individual organization. So we're going to try and, I hope we can, by making it more granular and more local, try and encourage practice so we can say, right, here's the resource that goes with trying to improve that particular metric, which is your target metric for this year. And as well as focus it across your entire system and see if it works. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's the approach we're taking at this point. And in the system, as you know better than I do, there's such a range of maturity, some which are just, newborn, some which are fairly well structured and functioned. So I think we're probably going to, what I'm saying to you now probably won't hold water in a year or two's time, but it's our starting point to try and do it on that basis by giving granular data and granular action based on that. We'll see how that pans out. I don't think this is a long-term solution.
Yeah, no, I think what has certainly been struck me multiple times when I've heard from you, Anton, is that power of data, and how, and to link that up with tangible actions and tangible outcomes that you mentioned. So I think just to let people know who are there on the call, I chair a group within NHS England, which is the Primary Care Diverse Ethnic Workforce Group, and we have been talking about having a national staff survey, an equivalent of what is there in secondary care, that we should have similar in primary care. And there was a feasibility study that was done by the Picker Institute to see the feasibility of conducting such a survey within primary care, which showed absolutely, when I say primary care, currently I'm talking about general practice, so just to be clear about that, but equally including our colleagues from optometry, dentistry, and pharmacy as well. So the feasibility study has certainly gone through, and what we've now looking at is we're going to go out to bid for a sample pilot survey, which is likely going to be done in 20 primary care networks. And within that national staff survey, again, we want to ensure that we include the indicators which have been included previously for the workforce race equality, so that we get some sort of read-through or standardization which has been used in secondary care. But there will be certain nuances, I think, that would be specific to whether it's general practice or pharmacy, because we want to, and we also want to ensure we include all our clinical and non-clinical staff. The experiences of our receptionists are equally important within our workforce as with our clinical colleagues. So I'm just going to ask you a last question on this. So just with that sample pilot survey, we will be out, and I'll let you know so that you know, for those who are taking doing their own surveys currently, I wouldn't say to stop. Please continue your work, because just the pace of, I think, work that happens sometimes centrally is not at that fast pace what you can do locally. So don't stop that, but I will certainly keep you informed as this national staff survey also comes out. The last question, Anton, I'll ask you is a bit more around the ethnic discrimination or race equality, and probably how do you tackle those conversations, specifically given your work within workforce race equality standards, that why are you only concentrating on race? What about the other forms of discrimination? Do the other discriminations not matter? And how do you address those conversations? I would just be interested to hear your take on it.
No, thanks for that, Zanny. You never give me easy questions, which is why I enjoy talking to you. I think it's, we can have a personal view about intersectionality and the importance of intersectionality and seeing people in the round. That's what we're used to as clinicians. We take people, you know, we don't just treat an ulcer, we treat an ulcer in a 40-year-old smoker who doesn't have good diet, etc., etc. So all of that stuff I'm preaching to the converted. I think from my perspective, fundamentally, if I think about this, however, my current role in NHS England, you know, what are the two things that people are, in amongst all the particular characteristics, how do we discriminate against people by what we see with our eyes? We do it on the basis of age and the basis of race. Most other things, most disabilities are hidden. Lots of people with gender orientation things, it's often hidden. But the two things in particular, and maybe gender orientation is the third one, would be that. Now, fundamentally, therefore, and we know that if we look at what's got worse year on year on year, is the evidence around people feeling harassed and bullied in the workplace around race. Whilst the other ones have stayed steady or hopefully got slightly better, race has got worse, and in particular during COVID, race discrimination. So fundamentally, I feel that, of course, on a personal, individual basis, intersectionality matters. But if we can get, and so the part that Sheila spared you in reading my dreadful, boring biography out, is the part that was saying that the most important task I actually see, if they allow me to stay long enough, is the task of developing the NHS's first race equity strategy. That is the thing I would like to do before I get back to being a clinician, which is we're holding the pen to launch it in October this year, a race equity strategy. And I think if we can get race equities begun to do right, the intersectional pieces that follow that, I think, will follow, because it's such an obvious and progressively worsening form of discrimination. So it matters to me most because it's the one that we can tackle most, but it's also one that's the biggest prize to win. And thirdly, because the actions that come out of that will hopefully follow through onto other things. So for me, that's the rationale. But on a personal, individual basis, I think, yeah, as a case-by-case thing, it obviously matters that you see the person in the round.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Anton. And I think I heard from Pranay as well, the famous quote by, I think, Martin Luther King, which says, I think injustices anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And certainly in the places in Nottingham where I suggested, we're starting in this place, and we are going to make sure that we expand as we go along. So thanks so much for that insight, Anton. Yes, they're difficult questions, and I understand that these are challenges, but I think who best to hear from than you, who is right at the center of all of this nationally and flying the flag for, you know, improving, as you said, from that best intention, lawn more race equality standards, to making sure that what we get are those healthy vegetables or fruits at the end, which is going to be the outcomes that we are going to be working towards. So thank you so much for that, Anton. If I'm just going to invite all the panelists in for a question and answer session now. So for those who have been there, if we can do a question and answer session, we're running on time, which is great. So we've got about 20 minutes. Sheila, if I can come to you first and see if we can pick up some questions, either from the chat box, and then if people I can also see have raised their hands.
So first question, oh, well, one of the questions is the recording going to be made available? Yeah, we will make the recording available to the attendees. Another question was around how do we get people looking at how we can get it right with the data on PCN clinical directors and their staff right from the beginning. And my reply really around that is just to get on and get the data. I think certainly when I started my role, I was thinking, you know, what is it that I want? And once you determine what it is you want, you can't apply, unfortunately, the RES indicators directly into primary care. And that's been one of the issues that I found from my experience. But it's about trying to release the survey, and it's not going to be perfect, but you need to try and identify what the issues are so you can decide what intervention is needed. And certainly I think a lot of speakers have touched on the importance of having buy-in from senior leaders within the area that you work in, because that really will help with advocacy for what you're doing, but also with generating resources for the work that's needed. And I think one of the other points,
can I just come in on that for a
Yeah.
second? So I think there are two sets of data. So there's certainly one which is on the NWRS, which would collect this demographic. Just want to ensure you can still hear me.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so one is the data on NWRS, which is going to be capturing the data on gender and ethnicity. And I think it may be something that people want to consider this as a part of the network or a network lead, perhaps the action point or the purpose to be able to collate that. And then second would be the survey, so that you're able to capture the experiences as well, which would be more through the workforce race equality standards. But I agree with you. I think if we can also get on not to just our general practice workforce, but also our wider primary care network workforce, then that would be a good start. But it's so you may want to consider that within your local networks, if that is something you wish to certainly consider and take forward.
Are there any other questions from our participants that haven't been answered already through the chat box? Or Anton, did you want to make a point?
Just typing long-windedly. What I was going to say is I would really strongly encourage those of you who've begun data collection just to complete that data collection point that Sonali began, because that information, granular and different and variable as it is, that's its strength. Because once you can put that together, you can then actually define in a most useful way how the ultimate national data collection should look like. The example I'd give very briefly is for bank staff, again, a hitherto hidden group, not included in the RES, in secondary care, 200,000 odd employees who are not accounted for. We got various bits of survey data like this, and have just literally 2 weeks ago got permission from the CPO to go with a bank RES next year, so that at least 200,000 people will now have RES data for them. It'd be brilliant if we could use that same kind of data collection that you guys are underway in your PCNs, collate that, and then go and say, right, here's how a data collection should look globally. So please keep going with that. Don't be disillusioned.
Thank you. We've got a question from Iyad.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Iyad. I'm a GP ST1 trainee based in Newcastle. So I heard about this event through the BMA, BAME network, and I thought of joining. Thank you all for all your wonderful talks. I was just, it's not really a question, it's more of my insight that I was hoping I can share with you, and hoping if, I don't know, someone might take it further. I don't know. So I'll try to summarize what I want to say to make it short and sweet. Point number one, I think language is very important. And I know we didn't go into the discussion of renaming BAME, but one good substitute might be ethnic equality. I personally find that very empowering. I don't know your thoughts on that. That's point number one. Point number two, Zoe mentioned that the solution that many colleagues brought up was to put more doctors or people from ethnic backgrounds in leadership positions. And to that, I would say, I think it's not just people from ethnic backgrounds. It needs to be people who have witnessed or lived the experience of falling through the cracks in the NHS, because you can be from an ethnic background but have the same ideology as the other non-ethnic people. So I think diversity comes more about thought and experience than just race. And you would know this, for example, if you look at the Tory government, you know, you could tell that the ethnicity might change, but the ideology is the same. So diversity needs to be diversity of thought and experience as well. And also, for example, if someone like who lived how it is to fall through the cracks of the system would also champion the issues with the urgency that these issues need, rather than just, oh, this is an issue. It would, you know, it would be more motivation to fight about it. Number 3, I would say, my opinion about tackling racism would be about creating a safe environment to speak up for both victims of racism and those harboring racist thoughts. I feel, because if you tackle racism as a thought disorder, or if you tackle racism from the cognitive behavior therapy model, that thoughts influence our feelings, influence our behaviors, we need to create a very safe environment for people to voice their negative thoughts and perceptions, and have someone like a professional psychologist help change that thought process, which then helps change their behavior, which then helps create a healthier environment for all. I personally believe people are kind. No one tries to harm people. I think they harm people because they think that's the right thing to do. So the question is, why do they believe it to be right? And how can we change it to be more positive and kind? And finally, when it comes to racism in primary care, it might be very difficult to tackle, mainly because, unlike in hospitals, there are many witnesses to behaviors. That's number one. While in primary care, doctors and staff are quote unquote like isolated, unlike in hospitals where it can be easily visible to everyone, like something went wrong. While here in primary care, it might not be so visible because it's very individualistic. And the other thing would be primary cares are more closely knit together due to the fact that it's a small practice versus a huge organization. So if a new doctor or a new staff member comes into a quote unquote family, they would be considered an outsider, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. If I can just, thanks so much for that insight. That was, I think, really helpful 4 points that you raised on that. And I just wanted to probably either bring in Sheila or Kavya or any panelist on this, because I think a couple of things that you said there, and I'll come back, pick up the point about working in isolation in primary care versus in secondary care, because you may all have seen perhaps the recent article by the pediatrician about a group of parents who were requesting a certain doctor from a certain background. So, you know, I think challenges exist everywhere, whether it be that primary care or secondary care, because we are a reflection of the society. So I'll pick up that question in a second, but I think I just want to pick up the question on what you said about kind of cognitive diversity rather than just the diversity that one brings in because of either their gender or color of the skin. And with that in itself, I think it carries an emotional burden. So certainly when I'm there in the NHS England in my role, it should not be automatic that just because I'm the only person who has the brown color, I will be the one who carries this piece of work, and I will be the one who carries the emotional burden linked to that. And I know, again, Prerna has spoken about it. So I just wanted to know if panelists wanted to share anything about, you know, when you're there in certain positions, the cognitive diversity that you bring in, and that emotional toll that it must take on you as well, being in such roles. And how do we ensure that the perception is changed? You're there not just because of the color of the skin, but because of the richness that you bring with it. Whether you have been through a lived experience necessarily or not. And again, those grades of lived experience can change. So I wonder if anybody wanted to come in to pick up this question. Saika, did I say your name correctly?
You did, Sonali.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share a little bit here. And I'm happy to share a lived experience. So, you know, many moons ago when we had what was then PCTs, we had an equality and diversity steering group, which was one that I was asked to sit on. And I remember turning up to this meeting, and I was sat at a table with a bunch of white middle-aged males and females, and I was actually the only coloured person there. And I remember sitting at this table, and one of the chief nurses sat there. She looked at me. The first thing she said is, "Oh, good, we've got somebody to take minutes." And I remember thinking to myself, "Thank you." You know, that's the first thing you see when you see me, somebody there to take minutes. You know, and these are the type of lived experiences and discrimination that we face at different levels. And, you know, as I mentioned before, one of the sitting items we have on our agenda is lived experience. And we've had, you know, doctors come forward to share that, you know, we had one doctor come forward and say, well, actually, you know, she attended an interview, and at the interview she was asked, are you expecting to wear a scarf, you know, when you're practicing? And it was a really bizarre question, but these are the type of things that we're facing. And going back to general practice, one of our meetings that we recently had, not last month, the month before, and it did get quite heated because, you know, we have representation at, you know, all levels from, you know, ICS and CCG. And some of the things that were being raised is actually, how do you push accountability here? Because we're all talking about things like, you know, data and good practice. But I think there comes a point where we have to accept that some people, you know, are what they are, and you know, they will stick, you know, to rules to a certain point. And there comes a point where we need intervention and we need enforcement to an extent, I feel. And the problem that we have with general practice is that we operate in silos, because each general practice surgery is an individual employer. How do you kind of have that accountability? So it's different if you work for a large trust or a CCG or what will be an ICS. You've got that level of, you know, almost like a corporate enforcement. But if you're working in a small general practice with, say, 3 partners and, you know, say 20 or 30 staff, how do you push that? How do you kind of like make sure that those staff feel empowered to speak up? Because if you work for, say, three partners and none of them have got that kind of like mentality or you know, that drive that we expect equality, if they don't believe in that, or they just kind of think, oh yeah, we'll do it, it's a tick box exercise. How do we empower staff to feel safe and speak up?
Yeah, and I think probably some of it goes back to what I had asked Anton as well, because it is about appealing to the hearts and minds. Because even though we feel that in a staff, in a secondary care, it all comes under that one umbrella, at the end of the day, there's still people. There's still, you know, people that you have to take along with you in the journey. And is it really just through that, you know, that stick approach that is going to work? Perhaps not. You know, you can put policies and procedures in place. You have to have people come along with you. I'm just going to bring Kavi into this if he wanted to have a response, and then I will bring in Faiza.
Thank you, Sonali. I think this is a really, really rich conversation. Probably will take us quite a long debate, but just a couple of points really I wanted to raise. I think this issue around diversity of thought absolutely is important. But we do need to recognize that we are faced with structural racism within the NHS. And that's what we're talking about. We need to be able to look at people who looks like us that are actually in those seats that are making decisions at the strategic level. So that needs to be a balance of diversity of thoughts. But also when we do have people at that level, like you've mentioned, or a couple of you mentioned about, often is that oppression, and that's understanding structural racism. We may have 1 or 2 people up there, but they don't feel able to challenge the status quo for whatever reason. And sometimes they are actually looking after themselves and they pull the ladder up. as they go up. And I think those are the issues that we need to challenge as well. And I think it goes with upskilling people. The other is stuff that you've mentioned about, I think it's about the behavioral approach, or the, kind of what psychological model we would use. I think there's two things out of that. I think there's about creating the psychological safety, but also I think if we were to wait for people to change their thoughts, we'll probably wait forever. Wait forever to the point where the next generation will still wait, because you know what, we're still waiting for people forced to change. For me, that is a really need for us to think about, actually clearly sets out behaviors. Whether you get it or not, you know what, I don't really care, because those are the behaviors that we need to see now. If you can't actually behave that way, you got to go out. So we'll give you the opportunity to actually learn and actually educate yourself, and that psychological safety is important. But actually we need to draw the line, and I think that's the way I think we need the balanced approach, really, of having clear line where we draw the line.
Thanks so much for that, Kavi. And I would echo that. I think one of the things that we saw that worked towards addressing the vaccine hesitancy was really having people like, whether it was Sheila or yourself or other people who were speaking to their own communities, talking about the vaccine. And I think it really mattered to be hearing from people who looked like them. So I think, and I think that was the point that you were trying to make as well. I'm going to bring in Faiza, and then we're going to probably have one last question and then start to draw this event to close. Faiza?
Hi, thank you. So I love the conversation about sort of winning hearts and minds, but I guess this kind of slightly leads on with that about momentum. Because at the moment, people do at the start really super passionate, involved. It links in with their intrinsic values as people and as members of the NHS, and it's in the news and in the media. But then as time goes on, people start to lose momentum and other things start to take priority. So is there any suggestions from the group about what we can do to help sustain that?
Anton?
So I think fundamentally people respond to stories. Data is sort of helpful, but fundamentally it's stories. And I never miss an opportunity when there's a story I come across on social media or whatever else to capitalize on that. So that Sonali mentioned the pediatric colleague. There's one in the Midlands region about the Nigerian nurse who got a dismissive accidental reply. Whenever these things come out, jump on it. It'll hit somewhere, and people remember stories more than they remember numbers. So I think the other thing is to get a coalition of the willing. There are people who talk a lot of nonsense, or say they talk a lot of sense, but they don't actually mean anything. And we all know that. And just find those people, keep them at arm's length or further, and then the people who are doing stuff get on board with them and find ways of doing things. And then finding little, as I often say, I'm a communist, and everything begins with grassroots. You make change by beginning at the bottom. So fundamentally, do little things and then broadcast them. That's how we preach revolution. You say my other thing is to be an angelic troublemaker. So produce data which makes trouble. Do it with a smiley face, but find the people who do it with you. And actually, for me, that's fundamentally what we can try and do, whether you're in a national role or in a local role. That fundamentally is it. And that's how you keep this going. And none of us will build this on our own, and we only build a tiny bit of it, no matter how big or small we are. But I think doing that bit so that we can look at our ancestors in due course and say we did our bit is the way that I can live with myself. And I hope, that's my tuppence worth.
No, thanks so much, Anton. And I will probably just add to that, Faiza. I think speak to people within your regions as well. It is about building that groundswell. So I know even though we had done this program for, Sheila had certainly come up with the idea for Midlands, but we opened it up so that people from across the country could join in. So speak to the other networks as well that are all springing up within your area, and also within the system. So in Nottingham, I've been asking my co-leads to speak to the people who are there either in the healthcare trust or within the federation, but planting that seed, just showing that curiosity, what are you doing within your organization to address this, and plant that seed and then see 1,000 flowers bloom from that. But use every opportunity to have this conversation, because there are going to be competing priorities. But this has to be a golden thread this cannot be something that happens in isolation over here. You know, we can't do equality, diversity, inclusivity work as a separate thing. It has to be very much be interwoven into whatever you do, because it matters to the people who come to work every day, and it matters to the people who we are looking after. You know, suboptimal health outcomes are not going to be of benefit to anyone. If we talk about maternal mortality, which is poorer in Black women, then these are also Black women who come to work, and it's going to be impacting them as well. So this is really interwoven, but keep on having those conversations and keep building those networks, which you're doing so well. So I'm going to hand over now to Shella after this conversation so that she can close this event and also tell you about our feedback.
Great, thank you. I just noticed, Anya, you've got your hand up. Did you want to raise any quick points?
No, I was going to just add something. I think the other thing we need to do is to plug in, build our communities. Because, you know, Faiza, you were asking about how can we motivate each other. Hello, by the way. Sorry, I've had computer issues all afternoon. I've just been off on. But we need the community, because when you plug into each other, when you feel like you're running out of steam, there's somebody else that is there to tell you something exciting and that is happening in their area, and you get motivated again. And that's why I like the fact that we have 4 people. In fact, we have 6 in our team. So when I can't think of ideas, Rupesh is there to think about it. But nationally, we all connect through our PC group, thanks to Sonali. And so you need to, we can't do this alone, is the simple, honest truth. As a community, we're very strong. The more of us that get into places, the bigger the voice we will have, and the more we can motivate each other to achieve more.
Thank you so much for that reflection, Anya, and I certainly echo all of those comments. I think certainly one of the major points of my journey over the last few months has been the power of actually networking, talking to people. You have one conversation and that will lead on to, you know, several other conversations, and that was one of the main drivers behind trying to set up this event, was so that people can network, meet each other, see what other areas are doing, and continue that momentum that has been started and hopefully be maintained over the coming weeks, months and years. Just want to extend another thanks to all of our speakers for coming along and sharing their invaluable insights into the work that they've been doing, which has been absolutely phenomenal. Special thanks to GP Task Force for helping set this up, and Covey's team, who have been amazing and phenomenal as usual, as well as the NHS Midlands Leadership Academy. So thank you all. Just for some feedback, this is the first time this event has been run, certainly in the Midlands region. I'm not sure about nationally, but it is something that we hope will be mirrored across different regions, so that the conversation regarding EDI in general practice can continue and evolve. So the feedback link is there as a bit.ly link, but you can also just pop your camera up to the screen and scan that QR code, which will then take you to the SurveyMonkey. I'd really appreciate your feedback. And no meeting is, for people who attend my meetings, no meeting is complete without a menti.com. So if you can just leave one word thought about how you found the event itself, that'd be really useful, just as a lovely word cloud that I enjoy doing. And my contact details and Sonali's are here, so if anybody has got any thoughts that they'd like to share, or any reflections, or any further information that you require, then Sonali and I are more than happy to be contacted through our emails. And we're both avid tweeters, as Mo said earlier, so quite happy to be tweeted or DM'd as you feel appropriate. So thank you again for everybody for coming along, and as I said, if you could complete the feedback, that would be amazing, because really we want to develop on what we've got and take the conversation forward.
And shall I add to that, for those who are outside the Midlands region, please speak to your regional EDI colleagues. Kavi, I wonder if there's any way we can put that in the chat box where people can link in with their, you know, your counterpart within their region, or how we can put them in touch, because we really want people to be linking in regionally as well, and building that momentum. And the last I would just mention is we're also looking at a sponsorship program, hopefully for the Midlands. I'm finalizing that with our Leadership Academy, and it's going to specifically be targeting women from a diverse ethnic background, to ensure that they are sponsored within the system, within primary care, but also how to take up leadership roles. So watch this space for that. Kavi, any thoughts on how people can link in regionally?
Hi, Sonali. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm having problem
Yes,
with my
can.
connection. Okay. Yeah, what I would suggest is if colleagues can email myself and Paul, I'll drop my email address in there, and then I can link them up with the relevant head of EDI in their region. That might be a way in, if that's okay as a starter.
Yes, thank you so much for that offer of help, Kavi. So if people want to find out what's happening within their region, if they're outside the Midlands, and a big thanks to Kavi and Paul and Wendy, who absolutely have been there supporting us. It's great pleasure to see that Midlands is being a trailblazer, certainly in this side in primary care, where we see so many of these networks developing. So I think Kavi is adding his email address to the chat box, hopefully now.
Yeah, it's there.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the lovely comments in the chat box. Really appreciate that.
So once people are done with the feedback, then you're happy to have the rest of your day or your afternoon back, and hopefully it's going to be a little bit of sun where you are. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, everybody. Bye.